accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, fellow Owens, you're listening to episode number 175 of the podcast of OA. This episode, we're going to be talking about the new hardcover graphic novel Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2, and we've got some great listener feedback, as well as our favorite Know Your Core segment. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, since our last episode, I've had several people reach out to me about your wife, Denise, wanting to know how she is, so I hope you know that, and you and your wife know that you get a lot of people behind you.
Awesome. Yeah, she's doing really good. She's not symptom free. She still doesn't have any sense of taste and smell. I think that takes a while to go away from what I understand, but she's been without a fever for 4 or 5 days now, and she's really good. She's getting her clearance to go back to work, hopefully next week sometime. But yeah, she's feeling fine. They had put her on she's got asthma, so they had put her on a special steroid inhaler. And to be honest with you, she said it works better than her regular inhaler. So she's gonna keep that around in case she really needs it. But apparently it must be. She said it actually took an effect right away, like right when she used it. So, but yeah, thanks for caring, guys. I mean, that means a lot, and I'll let her know, and I'm sure she'll be touched by that. But it's nice to know that there's people out there that genuinely care about others. You know, it's a tough world, and you know, I mean, there's a lot of heat being blown around by everybody. But you know, I'm glad our listeners care enough to reach out, and that means a lot. That's touching. So, but yeah, she's doing great, guys, and thanks for asking again.
It's fantastic news. And just to give everybody a quick update, our friend Daryl from our Facebook group is home now and exercising and getting stronger every day. He reached out to me privately the other day and just said that it was great to have the same kind of support, and you know, from the Blog of OA family. So I think that's fantastic. You know, I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to see happen with the people who get involved in the community that we're trying to build, and the fellowship of the ring, so to speak. And so it's great to see when we have people who need a little extra support that we're there for each other. I think that's what I think we all believe in as fans of superhero comics, and it's great to see it take place in real life. So fantastic stuff.
He must have gotten the full brunt of that. He must have had some really strong symptoms. I guess it varies with its intensity. I don't know how it works. I'm not a scientist, and I don't read much about it itself, but you know, I'm glad he's doing well. I mean, I haven't heard I don't know anybody. We don't know anybody that's tested positive besides Denise and unfortunately her dad and her mom. But outside of that, we've never knew anybody. So I didn't know how it worked. So Denise was genuinely concerned because, you know, I mean, obviously with Daryl's symptoms, it must have been pretty bad if he was in the hospital for a while, and you know, he's still recovering from it. And I'm glad that he's doing better. Thankfully, that it's a good scenario that turned out for him. But it must be bad in certain cases. So I'm thankful that Denise didn't get the full brunt of that. And I mean that with respect, Daryl. So don't take offense to that.
Absolutely. So it's good news all the way around, so to speak, I guess. You know, making the most out of a bad situation. There hasn't been a lot of Green Lantern news in the last week or so. I'm getting less and less excited by DC FanDome. There was a mystery movie panel that was supposed to be there, and that got removed. They took away. There was going to be a watch party for this new Superman animated thing. That's gone, and they're moving it to 2 days. There's going to be a day in September now for some other events. But I thought it was, I don't know, it's odd. You see all these panels and all these other things, and then there's nothing that's Green Lantern centric at all. Whereas it seems like a lot of the other major DC heroes are all getting some kind of spotlight.
Well, I mean, that's their narrative. That's been DC's narrative, Warner Brothers narrative for a long time now. I mean, Now I did see that HBO Max had sent out a couple tweets that had a little flirting with the commentary kind of stuff, but like I don't understand the secretive nature of it. I guess they want a big reveal and they want to blow people away by what they're going to present, if hopefully they present something. But I still, and I'd say this a lot on a podcast, that, you know, I can't wrap my brain around why everything has to be such shaded in mystery. And, you know, I mean, being transparent is one thing, but offering the fans hope, you know, and enticement and tidbits of information that they have to look forward to is a completely different nature, you know, and that's what fans of comic books love. I mean, even Marvel hasn't been that secretive about a lot of their stuff that's been coming out in the past, you know, and they've had some big reveals and everything like that. I don't know. I mean, you're right. I'm skeptical, and I got news for you. If nothing comes out of this about Green Lantern, I don't know, man. All bets are off. I will rail hard on Twitter. I will rail hard anywhere I can. It's going to be unfair to the fan base if that happens.
Oh, I agree. You know, there in what you were mentioning is there was kind of some flirting between the DC FanDome type of account and HBO Max's account, which kind of alluded to the fact, well, we're, you know, tingling with excitement about news about Green Lantern. And everybody, of course, everybody's ears kind of pop up when they see that. And so everybody's now expecting something. And without a panel there to know which one to watch, what are you supposed to do? Watch all of it and hope you're there when they talk about it. I mean, there's nothing that's related to HBO Max that's even in this event that I could see. And so how are we supposed to, you know, I don't know. I want to be excited about it, but I also don't want to get my hopes up because I don't want to get let down.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, because the letdown hurts the worst. And anybody who's a Green Lantern fan out there knows that every time they drop little tidbits and hints, it's always just these little nuggets, you know. And then, of course, on the other spectrum, you have to deal with, you know, Ryan Reynolds and his ridiculous railing on the character countless times and again. So that's all we get, you know. I mean, that's all we're afforded as being fans of this character. So, I mean, if there's any universe out there, if there's any character from the DC pantheon of heroes that doesn't get any love, I mean, it has to be Green Lantern. I mean, it just there's no other one. I mean, and he's been one of their top tier characters for decades and decades now, and I just don't understand why it's so difficult for them to provide fans some kind of hope for a future with that franchise. But I don't know.
Well, I mean, Green Lantern right now is outselling Flash and Wonder Woman, yet, you know, here we are.
That's what I mean, you know. And then of course you get the Flash movie that's been talked about time and time again, and then of course the big reveal with Ben Affleck signing on to appear in that movie, and again, and I say this with you know, and it's more Batman stuff.
There's going to be not one Batman, but two Batmen in the movie, according to the rumors that are out there right now.
How does that? I mean, I guess it works if you're going to do like a Flashpoint storyline, I would assume, but I don't know. To me, it seems like it would confuse the fans, but I guess the fans don't get confused by that. I don't know how that works. I mean, I honestly don't know how they're going to spin that, but whatever, man.
I think it could be okay, but to me, it becomes less of a Flash movie at that point.
Well, yeah, because it's like, I mean, it's almost like he has to appear in everything just to up its ratings. And
well, it's like there's no faith in the characters unless Batman's in it. That's what it feels like.
I mean, right. That's my point. It's like, you know, I get it. He's a marketable character. I get it. He's popular. I think everybody gets it. But even by that nature alone, I mean, Jason Fabok and the people who write Batman are always sharing tidbits of information about the big stories that are coming out and everything, and stuff that he's being used in. And yet Green Lantern gets Bumpkus? I mean, come on.
Now, see, last episode I was channeling my father. Now you're channeling your father with Bumpkus.
Oh, jeez. I know, right? You guys can quote me on that word. It's a great one.
So you wanted me to remind you about Dewey's Pizza.
Yeah. So a while back, I reached out. We got a local pizzeria here in the area, and it's called Dewey's Pizza, and they specialize in different titled pizzas. They got let me go to their website. The Edgar Allan Poe pizza. They got the Bronx Bomber and stuff like that. Well, on their menu, they have what's called a Green Lantern pizza, and it's red sauce, mozzarella, minced garlic, mushrooms, goat cheese, artichokes, and pesto. Well, a while back, and I completely slipped my mind because I wish I would have brought it up in an earlier episode, but I reached out to the owners, about how it garnered the Green Lantern name for a pizza. So Paul Faulkner from Dewey's Pizza reached back to me, and this was in May. And he said, "Hi, Phil. Thanks for taking the time to reach out to us regarding the origin of the Green Lantern. We think it's pretty cool. The gist is that when Andrew, our founder, was creating the menu for Dewey's, he wanted to include some of his passions in the names of the various menu items. He was a baseball fan, so we got the Bronx Bomber, a literature fan, so we got the Edgar Allan Poe, and he was a bit of a comic book reader, so we also got the Green Lantern. Unfortunately, there's not a lot more to the story, but I always thought it was cool that he put a personal touch on many of the items that still remain today, nearly 23 years later." And so I returned to work this past week, and I don't know, out of the blue, I was checking my mailbox because there was just a ton of stuff in it, and in there was a gift card from Dewey's Pizza for $20.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, very, very, very cool of them. Very nice, and I had the email, and I've always had it up and ready, and I kept forgetting to include it on our show, but I'm glad I reminded myself when I saw that gift card, so I wanted to make sure I included that on. So Paul Faulkner, if you're listening, don't know if you are, thanks for the info. I love it. I appreciate the gift card. My wife and I will use it at some point when we feel safe to go eat out in public again, and tell Andrew, your founder, rock on. It's cool to have an iconic pizza on the menu at your establishment. So St. Louis listeners, they got great pizza. And I've had the Green Lantern. I had it a couple times. It's good. It's a good pizza.
I wonder how much it would charge to deliver to New York.
Anything's possible these days.
It'd be quite the delivery fee. So we've got another great Earth One installment book to talk about, and I don't know about you, but I've been chomping at the bit for this one. I haven't even written my review. Every time I start writing the review, I go back and I reread it.
Yeah, it's pretty chock full of good stuff, man. It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll take a quick pause, and we'll come back with the Know Your Core segment, and then we'll dig right into Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2.
All right, sounds great. Hello, fellow Owens, and welcome back to another Know Your Core segment. This time we have Larvox from Green Lantern Volume 2, Number 9, created by John Broome and Gil Kane. Larvox is a member of the Green Lantern Corps, an asexual being that comes from a planet where all beings are part of the whole and there are no individuals. Larvox cannot speak and must use his ring to communicate. An excellent addition to the Green Lantern Corps, if I must say. So there you have it, a short but brief one. His home planet is from Spuda, I hope I said that right, or Spuda. And his partner was formerly Jack T. Chance. And there you go, fellow Owens, another Know Your Core.
Yeah, in blackest day or brightest night, watermelon, cantaloupe, yada yada, superstitious and cowardly lot, with liberty and justice for all.
Then again, maybe I should lead us. In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware our power, Green Lantern's light.
Yay, team!
Welcome back. Phil and I are ready to dig into Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2 by Gabriel Hardman, Corinna Bechko, and Jordan Boyd. So this is kind of the follow-up to the first volume, obviously, and the first volume was actually nominated for an Eisner. And I'll be honest, after reading this one, I like this one, I think, better. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I like this one a lot better than the first one. I mean, I wouldn't say, I'd say a lot better respectfully. I mean, the first one was really, really good, but this one was more enjoyable, I guess you can say. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what word to use there, but I did. I thought the second volume upped the ante a lot.
I think, the first volume, they've kind of established the rules of their version of this universe, and now they're free to tell a story without having to go back and do any of that stuff. And kind of the heavy lifting is out of the way in the first one. And this one's really cool. We get to see John Stewart for the first time, and this version of John Stewart is an engineer, and he's part of this kind of I don't want to say it's a private meeting between some individuals and aliens, and John is part of that crew. And the whole thing is that the aliens are going to help give us technical knowledge, and we're there to provide some agricultural resources. And this is an event being put on in part by Ferris Galactic. So we get to see Carol Ferris and Tom Kelmaku in this.
It says 3 years since the Battle of Oa. When they do their little spots on those pages, the Lalaran envoy ships in geosynchronous orbit above Earth.
Yes.
And a lot. So the Battle of Oa, that didn't take place in the last one. Refresh my memory. I don't think it did. Right?
I'm not sure if they're referring to the Battle of Oa is the end of the first novel, but when you see during some of the media flashbacks, you see them fighting the Manhunters. So I'm assuming that it might be the battle that took place at the end of the first graphic novel. That's purely conjecture on my part. But yeah, this is 3 years since the first book, at least 3 years.
This was a really, really good science fiction type of novel. It kind of reminded me a lot of in Aliens in a sense, not so much as in it popping out of your stomach or whatnot, but it had that old school kind of sci-fi driven drive to it.
Yeah, there's that grim grittiness. And I don't mean that in a dark tone, but in terms of space travel is dangerous, and this is very realistic. In traditional comics, space travel is kind of glamorized and romanticized, and in this situation, it's very it takes that very real world perspective, and that seeing someone like Hal Jordan as a Green Lantern flying through space is a freakish oddity, and that we're still dealing with people who we don't have artificial gravity yet. So you're talking, very modern take on space travel. So it's inherently risky. Right. And what I love the science fiction elements of it and the real world groundedness of it. What I really liked in the beginning was this whole incident that takes place between the humans and the Lalarans. It gave me such a Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country vibe.
Oh, that's a good analogy. You're right. It totally did. I wonder where he got the idea from that. Because it really did have a lot of elements of that involved with that whole plot setup. You know what I mean?
Right. And Hal's functioning in an environment where he doesn't really have a lot of faith in Earth's leadership. So he's kind of started his own aerospace agency clandestinely on the dark side of the moon, and he's partnering with Carol Ferris on some top secret projects. And he is also he's got a bit of a PR problem. The people of Earth either revere him as a hero, or they don't like him at all because he's drawing the attention of aliens whom they don't believe necessarily have good intentions, or there's some xenophobia going on there.
Which brings real elements to the storyline. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times these heroes are always glamorized, but you never see the other side of the story. Where you got your non-believers or your skeptics, like you see in the Superman films or whatnot. But this one rings a lot of that, because you do have your skeptics that are vocal in this book.
Sure. And what happens, the meeting between the humans and the Lalarans goes bad, and Hal is there trying to he's trying to save some lives. He's got to choose between saving the lives of some humans or chasing down the Lalarans who are fleeing with Jon Stewart and his two companions are fleeing space. And he, of course, chooses to save people, as one would expect. And it's really an interesting kind of a rescue because, again, we're so used to this very clean, a bubble goes around the ship and everybody's safe. And this is a very tense situation where you don't know if he's going to be able to rescue these people or not, despite the wondrous nature of the power ring. These people are fearing for their lives as this platform in space is being destroyed around them.
Yeah, kind of like remember Armageddon? That scene in Armageddon when they had to go to that Russian space station and it started blowing up and they had to hurry up and evacuate.
Right. Oh, I hate that movie, but you're right about that scene.
It's not the best movie, no.
my wife loves that movie and I can't stand it. So whenever it comes on, I'm always ready to flip the channel. She's like, "Wait, I was going to watch that." But yeah, you're right. It's kind of that feel, that things are being destroyed around them and Hal's trying to rescue people. He gets to Earth and he's immediately, quite literally put in the crosshairs of Earth's government who, he's walking out of a hospital and they want to arrest him. Guns are drawn and they're pointed at him and it's, it doesn't look good. And he's, trying to deal with the media.
Yep. And then he thrashes them and gets out of there. Well, thrashes their technology and leaves.
Yeah.
And I like what that one guy says, "Cut it. We're wasting ammo. He's too powerful."
Right.
Later.
Right. Well, and you get the impression too, the Manhunters at some point during this 3 years have come to Earth because they talk a little bit about, Hal bringing these threatening species to Earth. And you don't know whether, there's the cynical part of the media being an arm of the government. And is this something they're trying to do to stir anti-Green Lantern sentiment amongst people? And you don't really know.
Which is a cool element to add. I like how they added the tidbits of the government agencies that were at play. And then of course you had the Arrowhead platform, which was funded by Ferris. And then, of course, when Jordan leaves Earth, he goes to his own facility, the Jordan Aeronautics R&D facility on Earth's moon, which I like those added elements to his myth.
Yeah. Well, and the scene where they confront Hal in front of the hospital, they're so willing to shoot at Hal in front of a hospital, for crying out loud.
I know.
Hal's like, stand down. This is a hospital. Are we going to open fire on me here? And they do. And he basically will have none of it and he takes off and then goes to the moon. And then you find out a little bit more about what's going on and the secret project that he's partnered with Carol on. And you get introduced to some of Hal's team, which again is kind of neat. And then Hal goes off to try to deal with the Lalaran situation. And I love the thing that they do where before Hal leaves, he talks to one of his people that works for him named Andy, and he looks like he's a younger person. He doesn't look like he's an adult. And Andy has designed a backpack for Hal to carry his power battery with him.
I knew you were going to say that. That is one of the coolest things about this book.
And I love the scene between him and Carol because you get the impression that there's a romance there, but it isn't hitting you in the face. But there's that scene where his construct transmission where he's talking to Carol and Carol get within, kissing distance of each other, which I thought was kind of cool.
And it looks like they have a secretive kind of romance going on.
Yeah,
Some of the narrative here, yeah.
And I thought that was neat because Hal and Carol are hiding their relationship because of Hal's PR situation, his vocally critical nature against Earth's government.
And I guess that CENTCOM would be your government oversight. They come later on and raid the moon or whatnot.
Right.
But I guess that's who they're trying to keep their relationship secrets from. But yeah.
They're basically Hal's trying to protect Carol. And then Hal takes off for the Lalaran system and runs right square into a yellow lantern. So
a very different looking yellow.
Yeah, yeah. And as it turns out, the yellow lanterns are Cordians. And what I thought was neat was this almost becomes a pseudo version of the Sinestro Corps War in a way. It's a very different version of the Sinestro Corps War, but a version nonetheless.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm.
Because, and you find out that the Guardian that we saw, who we know is not necessarily on the up and up if you read the first volume. If you didn't, you shouldn't read this one until you read the first one. But Hal gets thrashed by this yellow lantern and leaves because he doesn't want to cause an incident. And then when he goes and appeals to the Green Lantern Corps, who are fighting some manhunters, he joins in the battle. And, Risha is still the leader of the Green Lantern Corps, and Hal's there. And it's interesting because they're not necessarily supportive of Hal's position. They don't want to get involved in this situation between Earth and Lalaran because they don't know as if the Earth people are actually innocent in this situation. You've got a situation where it looks like we attacked the aliens, and so we're being looked at as the aggressors in this situation.
And especially Sinestro, he was really outspoken at the beginning of this too.
Absolutely. And I love how nuanced this version of Sinestro is. Like he's when they're offered, there's a point at which the Green Lanterns are offered the yellow rings. The Guardian basically says, the Green Lantern rings were our first attempt or second attempt after the Manhunters, I guess I should say. And the yellow rings are kind of the new and improved version. And there's no talk about fear at this point. It's basically, they're just yellow lantern rings. And, sure. and they don't have the Sinestro Corps logo or any of that stuff. They've got their own little logo. And he basically causes dissent among the Green Lanterns, the Guardian does, by offering them yellow rings. And Sinestro thinks they should take them. And a lot of the Green Lanterns think they should take them.
It's kind of like its own little internal insurrection.
Yeah. So you kind of get a little bit of a Green Lantern Civil War on top of the Earth Lalaran situation.
And what'd you think of Lantern of Comed?
I thought he was really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very different. The ring inside the bubble. It's kind of neat looking.
Yeah, again, a very science fiction-y approach to this. I mean, I really could see some of this stuff almost like a movie. It's very cinematic. And I know part of that is because Gabriel Hardman has made a living doing storyboards for films. And this is very cinematic in its presentation.
It really is. And if you go back to Volume 1, I'm gonna reread Volume 1 myself. And you couple this one in there, it has the makings of a 2-part movie, well, third if they do another one or whatnot. And it's not over convoluted with narrative, and it feels like a science fiction / superhero movie, but not overdone on the superhero nature of it. Is that if that makes any sense? The superhero status isn't thrown in your face. They just basically seem like they're just galactic peacekeepers, and of course, Hal, being the ultimate peacekeeper that he is, has to fight this internal battle with these guys who basically are the Guardian, who's basically a tyrant, or the authoritarian rule, if mind you.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it really is cinematic in its nature.
Yeah, it's the way they approach it is that, obviously the power ring is very fantastical, but they don't approach it through a superhero lens. They approach it through a science fiction lens because it's advanced technology. They don't look at it as a magic ring.
Right, and they keep saying that the yellow ring is more powerful than the green, and that's all they categorize it as. It's just more. There's more power to it, which brings the element of your tyrant nature in, because tyrant natures always want to crave and drive for more power.
Right. And then we get to see Kilowog show up again, and it was neat to see Hal and Kilowog there together, and they do a nice job of reinforcing the fact that these two guys shared something important in the first book, and there's a camaraderie and a real natural friendship there, which comes into play later on when Kilowog joins the people who decide they want the yellow power ring.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I like what he comments about his backpack. He likes his backpack.
Yeah. Well, and they're also, they're trying to uncover, Carol's trying to figure out what's going on with this whole attack that took place. So there's definitely a sense that there's more to that attack than meets the eye, which of course we know there has to be for this to be a story. But at the same time, there's Accordion, a Yellow Lantern, who is on the Lalaran homeworld, and as Jon Stewart and his companions realize that they're prisoners essentially of war, this guy breaks him free, and he's saying, I'm trying to atone for something. I've done some bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes on at the same time that the Green Lantern Corps show up on Oa, because all the Yellow Lanterns have assembled there, and they meet up with the Guardian, and the Guardian offers them that ring. And the scene where he hands the ring out to Hal, and he says, I can make the situation with the Laurens go away. They're under my protection. I can take care of this with a word. All you need to do is take the ring. And he holds the ring out there for Hal, and Hal he's not going to have anything to do with it. And this is a, I don't want to say a different version of Hal, but this version is probably truer to the John Broome version of Hal than even the Jeff Johns version is. Because that version of Hal was a scientist, and he was a smart person. He thought his way through things. And here's a Hal who's been, basically felt like the Earth is not living up to its potential. And boy, if I just had the ability to do something about it. And then he's given that opportunity, and now he's trying to make life better for everybody. And he's balancing all of these very complex issues at the same time. And it's not that he's doing something rash or anything. It's very well thought.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, especially when he says, I don't trust you. You haven't given us any reason to. And like you said, it goes back to Hal's true nature. I mean, Hal by his character, I've never known him to crave ultimate power, unless of course, you have your story arcs with Parallax or whatnot. But to his true core, he never really craves real ultimate power in a fashion like it's portrayed here with how the Guardians are displaying it, or how Sinestro always craves that kind of essence, and Hal Jordan himself, shies away from it in this because he wants to do things the right way, because it seems like he wants to find a way through diplomacy, not by overreaching.
Right. I think some people, as they write Hal, when he encounters the Yellow Lantern on his way to go to the Lalaran people and rescue the 3 humans that are there, some people would write Hal as someone who's just going to beat the snot out of the guy and do it anyway. And this is a Hal who pauses and says, I came here on a mission of peace, and obviously it's not going that way, so I'm going to leave because I'm not going to make the situation worse.
And what did you think about Aricia being the leader of the Green Lantern Corps?
I think it's a neat turn for the character. I like the way that they write her character here. She's not fawning over anybody. She's a very natural leader. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. She was really, really a strong part in this, which I liked, because not a lot of females get strong parts in a male led character book, But I mean, there was times in here when even her actions overshadowed Hal Jordan just by her moral compass alone.
Right. I mean, there was the whole thing where, a whole faction of the Green Lanterns leave to go join the Yellow Lanterns. And Hal basically says, we just can't let them go. And she goes, well, that's exactly what we're going to do, because if the Corps isn't voluntary, then we're headed towards a very dark place.
Right.
And I really like that nature about her. And so there isn't so much Hal Sinestro tension as there is Aricia Sinestro tension, because Sinestro is the one that kind of gets his fellow Green Lanterns to realize, hey, we need to go and do this. And Aricia is trying to reason with them not to. And at the same time, you've got even Kilowog saying that, this green ring isn't enough. And Kilowog doesn't necessarily believe Hal when Hal says that, we didn't fire on the Lalarans. We didn't do it. And he doesn't even believe, Kilowog doesn't believe him. He believes the worst of humanity.
Sure.
And it drives a wedge between them, and it ends up being a moment of regret, ultimately.
Yeah, the interplay is really, really nice. Hardman did a good job with the characterization of a lot of these people that appear in here. And I like his writing, too. His writing is really, really succinct, and on point. And there was times when I was reading this book where I was like, I was trying to look for like a break in a narrative or something that didn't tie up, but he does a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job of closing all the plot devices that were existing in this book.
Yeah, and they start introducing the multiverse concept, and the Guardian talks about how the Yellow Lanterns came to be because he was banished by the Guardians when we don't know why, and he's not saying why, but he was banished by the Guardians to Quard. He went through a rift and came out in Quard, and he helped the Quardians rise up, and he designed the Yellow Lanterns himself, and he talks a little bit about Corinna.
Yeah, they mentioned him in there too.
So I thought that was really cool, but, Sinestro is in an interesting position because Sinestro at one point is sent to Earth because what we find out, should we get into spoilers?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to make that call.
Well, this is a Transformers story. There's more than meets the eye.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. There you go.
But at one point, Sinestro ends up on Earth, and Sinestro starts to question the Guardian that maybe this isn't the altruistic thing that I think it is. And that's that nuanced version. Now, Sinestro decides to part ways with the Green Lanterns, not because he's craving power or he wants to rule over his own people or rule the universe. He thinks that honestly that this is the right thing to do and that this is a more powerful version of the ring, which means we can do more good with it.
That pretty much sums him up. Yeah, you're right.
But then as things go on and he starts to see the dark underbelly of this Yellow Lantern Corps, he kind of has some second thoughts.
Yep. And, I like how he's written, and like you said that before, but I like how Sinestro's written. I mean, and it's in a very nuanced kind of way.
Yeah. Well, and there's some really neat scenes that go on when basically the Guardian and the Yellow Lanterns start to put the thumb screws to the Green Lanterns. And it's very brutal what happens. And Hal is essentially left in space with hardly any energy left in his ring, no energy left in his battery, for reasons we're not going to discuss, but there's a reason why he can't charge his ring. And fortunately, what has happened is that Cordian on Lalaran has given the three humans his ring. And John is wielding the Yellow Lantern ring and rescues Hal. And that's how they meet for the first time.
Which was pretty cool. I mean, I'm not a huge Jon Stewart fan, but I thought he played a pretty cool part in this particular book. I like the way he was written because it was different from his. It's different. I read Justice League, so he's in that a lot, and I've read a lot of Green Lantern books before with him and stuff like that. And even though he's not my favorite Lantern, I never really connected with him as a character. But in this one here, I liked his role that he played. He was basically like a prisoner of war, hostage or whatnot, and then of course they escape. But he uses his goodwill nature to, like you said, to rescue Hal Jordan. But he uses the ring in a good way.
Right, and they try to give a little bit of character background, or I don't want to say character background, but some character development in showing that of the three people, he was the one able to wield the ring because he could contain his emotion enough to control it, which I thought was a neat take. Mm-hmm. And, there's this scene where Hal is drifting through space for over almost 3.5 hours. And he sends a message to Carol that isn't complete. But you see him as he's going through this process, and you don't see any fear in him whatsoever. You see him still wondering about the wonders of space, even as he knows he's dying.
Yeah, just kind of floating out there aimlessly.
Yeah. And Hal has an option to go back to Earth once he finds out what really happened. He has an option to go back and set that right, but he also realizes, I've got to see the bigger picture here. I need to stop the Guardian first. I need to kill him. I need to get him off the table, because if I don't, the Green Lantern Corps is going to be dead. And there really is no Green Lantern Corps at this point. So I thought that was neat. Again, it's Hal without a ring, essentially. Mm-hmm. Going after a Guardian.
And then he gets rescued by the prototype ship that from his R&D moon base.
Yep. So that group gets pulled into it. And John, basically with his Yellow Lantern ring, gets involved with it as well. It's kind of a neat, the way it builds up to the climax is really interesting. And we get again into the multiverse stuff, which is really cool. And Aricia gets herself a yellow ring, and basically what Green Lanterns that have yellow rings kind of revolt a little bit. But in the end, it's a very... because it's a science fiction base and it's not a superhero-y thing, the way they take the Guardian out is very science-based. But it was very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty neat. And of course, Sinestro shows up later on with all the yellow lanterns.
Yep. And then when things are all said and done, the Guardians settle on Oa, which I thought was kind of funny.
Ironic twist of fate.
And John Stewart meets up with Carol Ferris to continue the work that Hal started with her. And then there's a kind of a jump a few years later, and we find out what's going on. And I don't want to talk anymore about that because I don't want to spoil it, because that last page is really cool.
Yeah, there's two good points in this book that if you give too much information, it kind of takes the effect away from how it feels reading it. Right. And I feel like if we would have given those away, a lot of fans would just listen to the podcast, but they maybe might not want to pick up the book. But I know we suggest a lot of books to read on here, but I mean, this one is good at its core and good in its nature and how it's written. And those two big reveals, they do it. You need to read it because it'll give you better justice if you feel it and read it for yourself than it is for me and Myron to divulge what happens.
Right. And yeah, I know we're trying to circle around things that are important plot points, but I really don't want to ruin this for anybody, because if you haven't picked it up and read it, you deserve to experience it the way it is written and not have somebody spoil it for you. But I will say this is probably, I'm not going to say probably, to me, this is the favorite book I've read since I couldn't tell you when. I really, really love this book. I can't say enough good stuff about it.
Yeah, I need to order mine. I got the digital copy. I paid for the digital copy right now, but I need to order the hardback version because it needs to look good on my shelf with the other one.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I, once again, had to go to Amazon because Diamond has yet to ship it to my comic shop.
Oh my gosh, that's still going on.
Yeah, jeez. Oh, yeah. So, I feel bad, but I was like, I can't wait for this because I've been looking forward to this for so long, and then it got pushed back. But it was definitely worth the wait, and it definitely sets the itself up for a third volume. And Gabriel Hardman and Corinna Bechko, I can't remember which one of them made a comment that, they wrote this with hoping to be able to do a third volume. They wrote it with that in mind. So I seriously hope we get to see that. It was interesting to see in the back. Now, I don't know if the digital had this, Phil, so tell me if it did, but okay. There was a sketchbook in the back.
Yeah, it's got them.
Does it? Okay. But you could see in the sketchbooks that they were dated 2018.
Oh, yeah, they are, aren't they? So
they've been working on this for a while. It must have been done a while ago. But yeah, I really, really hope we get a third volume. I'm trying to persuade my wife. Gabriel Hardman has a website where you can buy his original art. I really want a page of the original art from this book. And there's only a few pages left that have Hal in them. So I really want to try to buy one, but it's like $350, and I don't know if I can do that right now. But awesome stuff. I love the artwork. It's a different art style. It's not your traditional comic book art style, but it just reads so cinematically. And there are some things that, admittedly you have to, when you read it, realize that it's not apparent in your face what some of the things mean, because it's a science fiction story. So there are some acronyms and things that are going on. Like in the beginning, when the Lalaran ships show up in Earth orbit and they're having a problem with the feed, and it just says, what's the status in Argentina's feed? And you don't know whether Argentina is the name of a ship or they talk about the country or what is it. And it's one of those things where we're jumping into the reality. So there's not a lot of exposition. There are no, none of those traditional boxes that explain what's going on. It's all dialogue.
And it's not dense,
No.
It's not. It's definitely not Grant Morrison. So
right.
It's completely opposite of what he writes, but it's not overly done to where you have to really, really read it a couple times to grasp fully what's going on. I mean, and that's one of the things that I liked about it the most, because it's just like it didn't make you think too hard, or it didn't make you go, okay, well, this goes back to that issue. This might have some tie-ins to issue number 4. No, it's not like that. So it doesn't stretch your brain in a way that you think it's going to the way you think it's going to stretch your brain.
No. And again, everything is either like it's labeled when they change location, so it's labeled in that way. But there's no, I want to say there's no narration boxes, I guess is the best thing to say. It's all dialogue. And I guess that's why I say it reads cinematically, because there is none of that. There's no thought balloons, really.
Yeah, I was going to say there's no thought bubbles either.
You know, when Hal, for example, when he's floating through space alone, he's talking out loud, like you'd expect in a movie, because you can't see inside the mind of the character. It's all got to be dialogue or something to that effect. But
I highly recommend, man. The Green Lantern fans need to get out there and get this one.
Absolutely. Don't pass it up, whatever you do. And if you haven't read the first one and you weren't sure about it, pick them both up when you can, because they are definitely worth the read. I've read all of the Earth 1 books so far, and I know I'm biased because I'm a big Green Lantern fan, but this is really my favorite series of the bunch.
I'd agree with that. I really enjoyed the Wonder Woman ones by Morrison, but I'd agree. I mean, I like Hardman's take on Green Lantern, and I think it would be a good model to utilize for making a movie. You know, I mean, you could probably add a little bit more to it to make it more Green Lantern-y, but it's not overly done in your face superhero worshipness. You know, it's just good old fashioned galactic sci-fi fun, you know, and I think that would be a good take on how you could do a movie out of this.
Right. Well, and one of the things that's less comic booky is there really are no constructs. There are blasts and bubbles, spikes, those kind of things. You know, it's more grounded in reality. So you're not, there's no giant race car going through a Hot Wheels track, you know.
A big hand.
Right. Yeah. There's no hands. Hal doesn't make any hands in either volume. It's got to be a first. No giant fists.
I wonder if the guys over at Lantern Cast, have they did a podcast on this yet?
They were recording an episode this week as well. So for people that are excited about this book, I think within the next week, you're going to have 2 different podcast episodes talking about it. I can't wait to hear what they have to say.
We should have all got on at the same time and did like a big old round table on this. That would have been cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. All right, my friend. Well, let's take a pause and come back. And we've got 2 emails to go over, and they are big ones and great ones.
All right.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
So, Phil, we've got a couple of pieces of listener feedback, and both of these are in response to our last episode. So the first one is from Josh. So let me read this one. And basically, he addresses like a paragraph to me and a paragraph to you. So first he says, Myron, while discussing the comic book industry at large and comparing your own site to others, you seemed a little down. So I just wanted to offer you a bit of encouragement. You said it yourself, you serve a niche within a niche. Your website and podcast may not be known to millions. Comic books themselves, not superhero movies, do not garner that much attention anymore. But what you contribute to GL fandom cannot be measured by clicks and downloads. We Owens are loyal listeners that appreciate your hard work, love for the character, and care for the content you put out. If GL fans are a core, you are the core leader. Phil, you're pretty cool too. It seems like you take a lot of heat for hating on Simon, but I instead want to focus on Batman. I love GL and I love Batman, my 2 favorite characters in comics, and I have to say I completely agree with you, but for totally different reasons. You are correct. The market is oversaturated with Batman titles, so much so that it even begins to degrade the quality of the stories that DC puts out. If someone asked me to recommend an ongoing Batman title right now, I'm not sure I could recommend anything on the shelves. The continuity is a mess, and the stories are pretty much meaningless. I would much rather see a small number of really good Batman titles and more books dedicated to non-Trinity characters like the Green Lantern Corps. I love what you guys do. Keep up the good work, and thanks.
Well, no, he's right. I mean, that I didn't really think about it from that perspective, Josh, and and that's a good point you make about there being the quality and not quantity. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's one way to look at it. Even from the Green Lantern book, just having one book out there, we always harken back to the Blackest Night days and all the titles that came afterwards, and it was like just raining Green Lantern stuff and everything. And there was a lot to read, that, Myron, and a lot of fans had trouble navigating those channels on what books they should read and what they shouldn't read, how it ties in, does it tie in. I mean, they did a good job with all of them. I mean, I read them all and I enjoyed them all. But, I mean, he brings up a good point about oversaturation. And there's a point where you're reading to where you can have too much content that's just too much stuff to read. So he kind of helps me. That actually helps me focus a little bit more on the Green Lantern book, because it's like, he's kind of right. Maybe if we had another title that was Green Lantern Corps, I'd be okay with that. But it does help not having a pantheon of titles out there like Batman does, and with all his stuff. I mean, he's got Batman everything these days, and trying to pick and choose which one they want to read that given day. Because if you're a Batman fan, I'm not gonna lie, anybody out there who's a Batman fan, there's a lot of stuff to read. I mean, a lot of material, and there's so many storylines that even me not being a fan of the character, I wouldn't know where to begin. I wouldn't know where to step in. I wouldn't know what to pick up, and nobody has to give me any recommendations because I'm not going to. But in case I wanted to be a fan, I wouldn't know what to recommend and what to give somebody. Hey, you should read this. You should read this. Normally, when Batman fans talk, from what I understand, they always say, "Oh, you should pick up the Long Halloween." I think it was. I'm not really even sure if that's the title or not, but they usually tell them to pick up trades and read them in singular entities by themselves. I've never heard anybody spoke about where to pick up a Batman title if you're going to get in continuity. So, good points, Josh. I mean, thanks for that. That actually was very helpful to me to hear that.
It reminds me back when I was a much younger person, I was reading Green Lantern and Spider-Man mainly, were the two characters that I kind of latched onto. And I remember when I was reading Spider-Man, okay, you had the Amazing Spider-Man book. You had Marvel Tales that was basically a reprint of old Amazing Spider-Man issues. And you had Marvel Team Up, and then, they added Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, and then they added another book. And eventually got to the point where it felt like you couldn't, unless you had the budget, you couldn't have a diversity in your reading, because in order to keep up with the character you loved, you had to buy all of these books.
Sure. Superman did the same thing back in the 90s.
Yeah. Or X-Men. I mean, holy cow.
Right.
So I remember I got to a point where I just said, I can only stick with one. I can't afford to read both universes. I've got to pick one. And Green Lantern meant more to me. So that's the direction I went. But, and Josh, thank you so much for your kind words. I was feeling a little down, and a lot of that I think is just, I had the problem with the website and then getting the books and a few other factors. And I was getting kind of down, and I'll be honest, I'm still a little down, but I'll get through that. I'm very dedicated to this, and whether anybody reads it or not, in the end, it really doesn't matter. But if somebody gets something good out of it, then it's worth the work. It's just hard sometimes when you see sites that don't try to, they don't have the same, they're not doing it from passion. They're doing it from a business sense.
Right.
And they're getting stuff sent to them. Like there was a whole DC FanDome thing that got sent to a bunch of media outlets. And not that I would have expected to get one, but it's hard to see some of these media outlets who they don't even care enough. They're going to give it away. Well,
that's just it. Like they always tell you to support your local comic book shops, but yet these big businesses like Marvel and DC just focus on media relations to get their word out there.
Right.
And while I understand that's a certain point of view that you need to take to commercialize your product, they're missing where the good money is at, and that's at the local stores where people go because that's where people love to go because that's where they want to buy their product from. Not just because they want to sign into some website and purchase some books off of there. I mean, sure, you have those fans and those are dedicated fans as well. But you also have those fans that don't want to do that. They want to go to a store. They want to buy the tangible item. They want to have it in their hands. They want to put it in their boxes, put it on their shelves or whatnot. And to me, personally, I think DC and Marvel both are missing the bigger picture when it comes to small entities.
It's funny because I remember back during Convergence, DC reached out to me and asked me to, they gave me the exclusive sneak previews of the 2 Green Lantern books. And I was so humbled by that. And you see now when they do the preview pages, it only goes to the big outlets.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I understand because they get the hits. But at the same time, I think they would get just as much traffic by giving it to any site. I think somebody who's a Green Lantern fan is going to go wherever they can find the previews. So I don't think that means necessarily that much. Now, sure, if you're a CBR or a Newsarama, you've got a bigger social media reach to be able to reach a bigger audience to let people know where to find the content. That's true. I don't begrudge that one bit, but it'd be nice to be thrown a bone once in a while. And,
sure.
and I've had my fair share in the past. So I guess I shouldn't complain because they've, in the past I've gotten some things like this, the Convergence stuff. They reached out to me to talk to Dan Jurgens or Robert Venditti, those kind of things here and there. And that's nice. I just wish that I could have the same benefit of some other sites to be able to do a better job. Especially when you look at the Morrison books, because when I write my reviews, I feel like I want to share the details or help people who are having a hard time digesting it. I want to help them with that, but I'm not given any advanced time to be able to do the research and really put the meat and potatoes in the review that I might like to.
But if you read a lot of those reviews from those other outlets and stuff like that, and here, I'll be honest with you, I don't read reviews for the sole purpose because I don't want it to taint my vision of what I read, especially reading a review ahead of time. Right. Because I feel like if I read a review and I go to read the book, my image of that book and my perception of that book is going to be altered by somebody else's appearance of it. So if I do, sometimes I'll go to read reviews just weeks or months after, just to see if I can get somebody else's take on a book. And a lot of times they're not even that great reviews, not in a way that you do your reviews. Like you said yourself, you put your heart and soul into the content and you help assist readers by tying in different things that take place that, I miss a lot of them, but your history enough to where you can tie those together. You bring those threads in that helps somebody understand a little bit full what's going on in a book. Not a lot of reviews and not a lot of reviewers will do that. They'll just look at it for face value, for clickbait, or just because they're a top tier reviewer and people pay attention to what they have to say. And I've never been like critics. I've never been a big believer in critics. I don't need a critic to tell me what I will and won't like because I'm not them. It needs me to view it, to read it, to know if I'm going to like it or not. Not somebody else who paints a perception of it that more often than not, I'm probably not going to agree with,
Right. Like I do a review in a very broad sense of doing a review. I mean, I review the book and I talk about what I think about it and I assign a lantern number to it, but I try to spend just as much time trying to either add content that will help someone get more out of the book. And that's what I feel I do that nobody else does as well.
I agree. I completely agree with that.
So, but I'm doing it at a disadvantage. If I had the luxury of being able to read it in advance and prep it so that the review could be timely and get it out there. I mean, I still haven't reviewed the Earth 1 book. I haven't reviewed the 80th anniversary hardcover. I haven't reviewed the Space Traveling Heroes books because they're big books. If I had the advantage of having them a couple weeks in advance in a digital format so I could really prep it, I'd promote the heck out of it.
Sure.
But, by the time I get my reviews out there, nobody's going to care. That's just the reality of it. I'm still going to do it because maybe somebody's holding off on buying those books because they do want to hear what I have to say. So I'm still going to do it.
Sure.
I just would like to have the ability to do a better job to help promote the character. I look at this site in the podcast as I'm trying to be a good ambassador for the franchise, but I'm doing it at a disadvantage over these big websites that have all the accessibility in the world, but none of the intent. But anyway.
Yep. Spot on.
All right, Phil, you got the next one.
All right. Next one's a long one, so get ready. Here we go. This one is from Eric. Eric says, "Hey, Myron and Phil, how's it going? First, let me apologize for how long this might be because this has been long overdue. I've been a listener of the podcast of OA from the very beginning, going way back to when Myron and Bill reviewed the movie, and I haven't missed an episode since. I've always wanted to make time to write in, but often I'm caught up with school and work. But with the pandemic, I've had much more free time to catch up on the podcast and finally able to reach out to you guys. My name is Eric, but you both might better know me as Celtic5-27 on Twitter and Instagram. There's so much I want to say, but first I just want to start with thanking you both. Thank you to Myron for all the hard work and dedication you put towards the blog of OA and the podcast. I'd also like to second that notion. Thank you, Myron. I can't begin to tell you how a big role you've played in me becoming the big Green Lantern fan I am today. Second to probably only Jeff Johns. I've been a GL fan for a little over 10 years now, and when I first started getting into the character around the peak of its popularity, I began to look for Green Lantern fan sites to learn what I could. There weren't many, but the blog of OA was one of the few I found, and by far the best one out there. When it got announced they were doing a movie in 2009, I really started to gain more interest in the character. And anyone who knows me knows that, like Myron, Hal Jordan is my guy. And like you, Myron, and a lot of other fans out there, being a Green Lantern fan helped me overcome some of my fears. Growing up, I had a pretty bad stutter, making it very difficult for me to talk and socialize with people. But reading Hal Jordan and seeing how confident he was inspired me to want to be like him. Hal would never let fear stand in his way of doing what had to be done, and no matter how hard the task at hand was, he'd never give up. That's a hero I wanted to be just like. And when I first heard your story, Myron, it really inspired me, and I spent years trying to overcome my fear of stuttering, and eventually I did. I truly feel like I gained confidence with not only the help of Hal, but you as well. So once again, thank you for all you do, and the blog and the podcast. Don't think it ever goes unnoticed or unappreciated. And also a special shout out to Phil, who was one of the first Green Lantern fans I followed when I made my Twitter account. I think it's great to have a positive and supportive GL fans like you out there, like you, Phil, especially when we live in a time with so much negativity among the comic book fan community. So a big thank you to you as well. Now, talking about the last episode, where you guys talked about Green Lantern issue number 2 from the early Johns era of GL, I honestly have to say that the No Fear story arc is one of my favorites of the entire run. I really do enjoy seeing Hal on Earth, where he has a job as a pilot, a supporting cast, and a rogues gallery that's not just made up of ring wielders. Though I really do miss seeing other characters of the emotional spectrum. I really wish we got more Hal stories like this, and I thought maybe with the Morrison run we would, but that hasn't gone where I thought it would. But it's still always fun to go back and revisit these issues, and I'm really glad you guys are doing so on the show. And I feel like I do have to mention that when I was listening to the podcast and Myron mentioned the autographed comics he has, made me realize despite my decent-sized comic collection, I don't have any. And even though I've been fortunate enough to meet Jeff Johns twice, I never had him sign anything. So I went on eBay to search up comics signed by Johns, and it just so happened to come across the exact issue you guys talked about in that episode. And while it's not a number one issue, it just felt like it was meant to be, and the price wasn't so bad either, so thanks for inspiring me to do that. I also want to address the topic of not having Hal Jordan in the next movie, because the first film underperformed, and I very much disagree with that. It never makes any sense to me when people try to make that argument when so many other comic book characters have gotten multiple shots on the big or small screen. But also, I don't know why some are still debating this when we already know the movie is going to feature Hal and Jon Stewart unless it's completely rewritten again. Regardless, I'm confident Hal will be there because, kind of like what Myron was saying, Hal Jordan is the face of the Green Lantern franchise. When it comes to DC marketing material, like the DC FanDome posters, Hal is almost always the Green Lantern they use. He's also been featured in more animated films, TV shows, video games, and other merchandise compared to all the other GLs, and I don't see any of them catching up anytime soon. And just think about it this way. Every Earth Green Lantern that has come after Hal has an origin that in some way is directly tied to him. So really, how could you not have him featured before introducing the others? But anyway, at this point, we don't really even know anything about what's going on with the film or the HBO Max series. So here's hoping we get some actual news and reveals at the DC FanDome event. We Green Lantern fans really need something to look forward to. Again, sorry for making this so long, but I just feel like I had a lot to say, and there's so much more I want to talk about with you guys. So hopefully I can write in again soon. Until next time, take care, keep up the great work, and always keep those power rings charged.
So, Eric, thank you so much for that email. It means a lot more than I think I can put into words. And Phil, thank you for reading it because I've tried to read it a couple times. I've had a hard time getting through it all myself, just reading it because I'm very touched by Eric's story. And
it really is. Yeah, it's a personal reflection upon your story, and it takes a lot for Eric himself to be able to write about it just as much as it does take anybody to even talk about certain things in their past that has had an effect on them personally.
Yeah, and it goes to show the power of this medium and the characters and how they can inspire people to overcome things that they have no choice in. We can all make bad choices in our lives and put ourselves in situations to overcome things, but it's also different when you have no control over anything and you're given, you're dealt the hand you have in life and you overcome it. And comic book characters can do that. And that's what I've always found so inspiring about Hal Jordan, because you can project whatever your fear or your challenge is onto his story and be inspired by it. And that's one of the reasons why I particularly latch on to Hal as the guy. And, in this Green Lantern 80th hardcover, there's an essay by Jeff Johns, and Jeff says Jeff comes right out and says it. He says Hal Jordan is the cornerstone of the Green Lantern franchise. And it's true.
I agree. I completely agree. And not only that, but fear comes in many shapes and sizes. And it doesn't just have to be like fear as that item where like I'm afraid of the dark, or fear of I fear going out in public. Fear can be anything, and it could be any obstacle that you need to overcome. And getting yourself to overcome that isn't easy by any means. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could come in anything at once, and it's not always easy for people to succumb to that and be able to get over that hurdle, so to speak, like yourself with your condition, and much like Eric with his, and then to openly talk about it is another hurdle to overcome. So, both of you guys sharing those personal stories with me, I get touched by them because I've seen what you have went through. You and I talking a lot like we have, and knowing this tidbit about Eric, who, it's just a fan and a guy that I talk to on Twitter every once in a while, and we're like-minded and stuff like that. And now that I know a personal inflection about him, it makes me appreciate him more and more as an individual. And it also it gives me a connection to him that I don't have with a lot of people that do or do not follow me on Twitter.
Exactly. Both of you guys, thank you so much for sending us your comments and stuff and things. It's very uplifting for us. If you both made comments that you felt some inspiration from some of the things we've done, and both of you guys need to know that you give us energy by sharing that. And when we do feel down or we feel like we're not necessarily reaching out to people the way we think we should be, it helps. It really does. So I do truly appreciate that.
It really does. And I'll be honest with you, when you first reached out to me, when I reached out to you and just, threw a bone out there about, being on the show or taking over when Bill left and stuff like that, I didn't expect anything to come of it, and then, it just fell into place at the right time. And I took a chance and here I am years later doing the show with you. And every time we go to do it, and when the weeks go by, or when I know Wednesday or Thursday is coming when we usually record, that is the one constant that I've always looked forward to, and during this pandemic, you and I have been connecting a lot, with pushing out episode after episode after episode, and it helped me get through it. It helped break up the weeks, because, raising a child, and not being able to go out in public and do the things that you normally do with family stuff, it can be pretty taxing on a person, and you and I being able to connect, you being in New York, me being over here in Missouri and St. Louis, we connected every week or every other couple weeks. And, that was something that I always I can't wait. I can't wait till I get to talk to Myron again. I can't wait till we get to just talk about stuff, talk about things, talk about what's going on his end of the world, what's going on in mine, and then you listen to listener feedback like this and these write-ins, and they're so flattering because it's your voice is out there reaching people and you affect them in a way that you don't know, because like you had always said, you're just a voice on a podcast that's going out there. You don't know who it's reaching, and you don't know how it's reaching them, and you don't know how it's affecting them when it does. And sure, we have our fair share of maybe critics out there because I rail on Simon all the time and I rail on Batman constantly. But it's all in good fun, people, and getting guys like Eric and Josh and the number of other fans who've written in and given us flattering support, that just makes my drive even more for how much I love doing this podcast with you. And I'm appreciative every time by Myron and by being on here.
Absolutely. So we're going to have to revisit, go back and do issue 3 because we did the first 2 issues and we stopped because we had new books to do. But we'll have to get back on that again. Yeah,
that's no problem. I'm looking forward to it. I like doing the first 2, so I got no problems doing the third.
Cool. All right. So everybody, thanks for tuning in and giving us some of your time, and hope you got something out of our conversation about Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2. Great book. Can't recommend it enough, just to reiterate. So we'll be back in a week or 2 and talk about some more Green Lantern stuff. And we'll be talking about whatever might have come up in DC FanDome, if anything.
I was gonna say, man, we got DC FanDome, so we're gonna hear some news. I have a feeling we'll hear something. Something's gonna come out of this.
We have to put our blue rings of hope on for that day.
That's exactly right.
All right, friends. Well, we'll see you again soon. Till next time, keep your power rings charged, take good care of each other, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.